Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's IoTView webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Looking for a quick audio check from our team down in Austin, making sure that you guys can see and hear everything okay. And then, all right, we're good. Make sure. Sometimes I accidentally leave my headset muted here, but we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Courtier. I'm Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft, and we're going to go through a few different things today. I'm going to give you a lead-in introduction, a little bit about the company, a little bit about InduSoft. And not that you don't already know about InduSoft. I mean, you're here already, but this is going to be more of a lead-in and talk about and kind of build a foundation on our IoTView product and kind of get you to where that comes into play here. We're going to talk about what is the Internet of Things, Industrial Internet of Things, and other related ideas such as Industry 4.0 if you're in Europe, and Made in China 2025 if you're in Asia. We're going to talk specifically about IoTView and what are some of the more recent features of that product and related features such as the SMA client and thin client and some of the newer features related to that. I'm going to talk and demonstrate the MQTT driver and tell you why that's important for a IIoT type application. We're going to demonstrate an application actually downloaded and get it running on a Raspberry Pi that I have here on my desk. And I'm going to show you how to save to a database, which I think is extremely important, which could be a cloud-based architecture or local server. Show you some of the resources that you have, and then open it up for questions and answers. So again, some quick logistics for this type of webinar. I can't hear you. So if you have any questions, put those please into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. I'll try to get to those during the webinar. If I can't, I will certainly get to you those questions at the end where there's a special section for it here. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, I'm going to kind of build a foundation to then talk about IoTView. But in order to do that, I want to kind of build into that. So if you're not aware, InduSoft was established in 1997, and now we're part of Schneider Electric Software Group, and yet we still have a very customer-focused culture. For example, this webinar and the webinars that we put on 3 times a month are really a result of being still customer-focused. The feature set that we put in the product, we really get from you, our users. I want to talk about, I'm not going to read every line on here, but things that are related to what we're talking about here. We were the first package to have full HMI and really almost a SCADA type product for Windows CE. And why is that important? Well, a lot of our customer base is still using Windows CE, and it helps us keep focus on a very efficient product, a very small footprint to install, and a very performance-oriented product. Even running on the low horsepower computers. And in doing that, a couple of things have come out of this. We have support for HTML5 integration in the product. And what does that mean? One of our thin clients, the SMA thin client, is actually used to publish screens to things like iPads, iPhones, Android phones and tablets, as well as desktops and Macintosh, of Safari, things of that nature, and even Windows desktops. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's important. And then really what we're going to do is focus on this IoTView product, which is just another runtime license for InduSoft, but it happens to be on Linux or VxWorks. Or potentially other operating systems as we move along. But first, a quick little side note. If you're not aware, we've really won a lot of awards from a lot of different outlets, and one that we're most proud of is this Control Engineering Magazine Engineer's Choice Award. And what I need to say is that we are up for the 2017 award. So if you're a Control Engineering subscriber, please visit the website as you see here. And again, we're recording this, and it's going to be posted on the website, the slideshow as well as the recording, in usually just a couple of days. So you can get at this link, and if you're already a subscriber, you can just go to controleng.com. And if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and go there, subscribe, and then vote. We'd love to see you vote for us. We'd really appreciate that, especially if you see something here that you like or are familiar with InduSoft as a product and like what you see. Okay, enough of that. So We're going to talk a little bit here about portability and why this is important. So for those of you who don't know actually the naming conventions that we use, when you develop a project in InduSoft Web Studio, the development environment is called InduSoft Web Studio. Sometimes we abbreviate that IWS. And when you run and deploy this on a full Windows PC, such as a Windows desktop or server operating system, we also call that InduSoft Web Studio, but that's the runtime or the full runtime. Now, if you're deploying on a Windows Embedded Standards operating system, we call that license or that product Embedded View. And if you're deploying on Windows CE or Windows Mobile, that's called CE View. And now, and what we're going to really spend a lot of time talking about today is IoT View, our license to run your project on Linux or VxWorks or potentially other operating systems coming down the line. But the really neat idea here is that you only need one development environment and you can deploy this project on any of these systems. What's been really neat is I've actually deployed systems that have run on Windows CE, run on the full Windows runtime, run on Linux, and then also allowed you to view those on an iPad or a tablet of some sort, an Android type device. I'm getting a note here that the audio isn't very clear. Can everybody hear me okay? I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. If not, I'll make some adjustments. I'm seeing that everybody else is fine, so I apologize if your audio isn't very clear. Maybe it will clear up. Hopefully it will clear up, and if we have any other problems, please, somebody let me know. Okay, so these are the names of the different runtime licenses, and I wanted to just kind of lay that out and not just gloss over that. But we're going to actually specifically be talking about our Internet of Things or IoT View solution here. And this is kind of saying the same thing in just a little bit different way. Is all these different operating systems are supported in different platforms, different ways that you can deploy InduSoft Web Studio, whether it's as a traditional HMI, whether it's a SCADA system monitoring many HMI systems, or an embedded mobile. And by embedded, we mean embedding the actual product into the thing or the device that's going to be maybe on the plant floor in your process. Let's see here. I am getting another. So most everybody is saying that the audio is fine. A couple of people are saying that the audio is muffled. Let me try to adjust my headset here. Hopefully that will help. I'm on a headset that I don't normally use, so I can actually be connected to my Raspberry Pi at the same time. So hopefully that is a little better. Maybe I will try to talk a little quieter so it's not maybe overpowering my microphone here. Okay, so moving along. Talking about the different the different thin clients that we have and why is this important. The first thin client that InduSoft came out with years ago was based on Internet Explorer. And the idea was that you would view your screens remotely and see that data remotely by opening up a web browser, maybe typically in like an office environment where you would maybe go to that production manager's office, open up their Internet Explorer on their desktop or laptop PC, point to the real runtime, and they then be able to remotely view those screens, but you're going to be seeing those on an Internet Explorer browser window. So then we had customers say, well, I want to put this out on my machine. Maybe I have a large machine or a long machine, and I want to duplicate HMI out there. But I don't want Internet Explorer on my plant floor or on my process. So that's when we came up with Secure Viewer. Now, Secure Viewer allows you to view the screens remotely and optionally interact with those screens, just as the WebThing client. But when you use Secure Viewer, there's no browser to be had. It's full screen, edge to edge. In fact, it looks just like the real runtime. In fact, when I teach training classes, I have to teach students how to be able to tell the difference between the real runtime and the Secure Viewer thin client, because you really can't tell the difference just by visually looking at them. So these typically ran in Windows environments. They do run in Windows, not typically, they do run in Windows. And then we needed a way to be able to view and interact with our screens remotely on newer technologies, things like iPads, Android tablets and phones, iPhones, as well as Safari on a Mac and things of that nature. And a few years ago, we were getting pushed by Microsoft to develop Silverlight, and we saw that the industry was kind of going a little bit away from Silverlight and maybe going to be focusing on HTML5. So in this, Studio Mobile Access actually uses HTML5 as a technology to then send the screens as well as the data, where in the past the data has come through via ActiveX in the WebThin client, the Secure Viewer Thin client. Now in Studio Mobile Access, or SMA, it's using HTML5 to get that information across there. And that's what makes it compatible with Internet Explorer 11, Chrome and different variations of Chrome, Safari, things of that nature. And why is this important? Well, a couple of reasons why this is important. Number one, unlike some of our competitors that when they're viewing on a tablet or a phone, they have to install an app. Well, we don't have an app to install. We just have you open up a browser and point to it because we're using pure HTML5 there. By doing that, you don't have to maintain the app. We don't have to maintain the app. The customer doesn't have to maintain it and keep that all under control. You just open up a HTML5 browser and point it, and it makes it real easy and real clean. The other thing is when we're running InduSoft on a full PC or Windows CE or Windows Embedded, there's what's called a local viewer. And what we've chosen not to do on the embedded IoTView type applications, and you'll see why in a little while, we chose not to put a local viewer into that product. And so anytime you need to view the screens, let's say, it's done through an SMA client. So on a tablet, on a phone, on a Chrome browser, on an Internet Explorer browser. So that's why I'm showing you this slide and talking about this. So you'll see that in a little bit. So a little bit of definition of what is the Internet or Industrial Internet of Things, and more simply, what is IoT or Internet of Things? And we'll talk a little bit about that here. So the commercial kind of definition of the Internet of Things is describe the practice of connecting devices through the use of the internet, typically up to a cloud-based server where you're collecting information and then being able to do something about it. And really, if you're not aware of this, the Internet of Things is already connecting computing devices, appliances, humans, and other things through the internet. And I put this on here because really when you think about it, your smartphone can really be considered an Internet of Things type device. Why am I bringing this up? And I hope this is new and informational for you because I saw a recent study that said, and I don't remember the exact number, but I know it's higher than 50%. I think it was 65% of industrial automation professionals really did not know what the Internet of Things or Industrial Internet of Things is. So hopefully as a lead into this, I'm going to try to get you to get that understanding, at least the understanding that I have. So the idea of this Internet of Things is being able to, with a standardized communication, get information up into the cloud or a local server, it doesn't have to be in the cloud, and then be able to then analyze that information and react to it and make intelligent decisions. Now, driving some trends here is this Internet of Things, not only in industrial automation, but just in commercial and lots of different things. I'm not going to read these numbers, these entire lines, but you can see just the magnitude, 15 times, 50 times, 80%. We're coming online more and more, and this is really an opportunity here that there's $19 trillion of untapped value going on. So it's really coming along, and you're going to see this mentioned more and more. I think half of the emails that I get every day are related to IoT or IIoT. The different platforms that we really have related to this are Windows CE and Embedded. They're very strong in industrial HMIs and these devices that are out on plant floors. VxWorks, if you're not familiar with that operating system, nearly 40% of traditional real-time operating systems are built on VxWorks. And Linux, and currently more than 25% of all embedded shipments are using Linux, and much, much more if you're actually talking about Android, and depends on how you look at these different numbers. Well, what do we have to talk about this? Well, the IoTView solution is platform agnostic, which means depending on your equipment, you can run on Windows, VxWorks, Linux. We have a rapid application configuration environment. That's an acronym that we use called RACE, R-A-C-E. And what that means is it's a very easy to use, very quick to develop your project environment. This takes a small footprint, really requires a low horsepower computer to be able to run. And it's interoperable in being able to talk to different protocols, historians, databases, and I'm going to demonstrate some of that stuff as well as having HTML5, which I talked about, and the remote management tools, which I'm going to demonstrate and how easy that is to be able to deploy this type of project, and just how affordable this is. And really what we're talking about is embedding this into valves, smart meters, flow meters, things of that nature. So cost becomes very critical at that point. So I wanted to talk about, before I get into the industrial examples or where this is, I wanted to talk about some commercial examples of this. And when I've showed this slide for different presentations around the world, this is when the light bulb goes off and customers go, oh, now I kind of get it, what this Internet of Things is. The first thing I want to point out in this upper right-hand corner is the Nest thermostat. If you're not familiar with this, this is an Internet-enabled thermostat that you basically replace the thermostat in your house and connect it to your Wi-Fi, and it's got sensors on the front for motion, and it can understand when you're active and in the house, when you're away, and it starts to learn your schedule, and then log your information up to your cloud account, and then be able to set back your thermostat automatically. It knows that at certain times of day or monitors the weather outside, that, hey, I turned it up a couple of degrees. It starts to learn where your comfort ranges are, things of that nature. And it can make your system at home more efficient. For example, when your furnace turns off or your air conditioning turns off, it keeps your fans running so that it blows that hot or cold air through your system and out into your room. That's kind of neat, but that's again, a cloud-based device, kind of a very simple example of an Internet of Things type device. I also want to point out here, up in the upper left-hand corner is this thing that I actually have and I use. It's called SwingBite, and it's this little device. It's about the size of your thumb, and it straps on your golf club, and it analyzes. It's got a motion sensor, a system on there that when you connect up, it connects up to your phone or your tablet. And I actually take my tablet to the driving range, and in fact, I did that this past weekend. Went to the driving range, had the SwingBite on my golf club, take swings, and then the 3D motion sensors actually analyze your swing in 3D, and you can rotate this around. It's almost like a CAD drawing. You can look at an overhead view, a down-the-line view, and it logs this information into my phone or my tablet, and then logs it up into my cloud account. And I can real time right there analyze my swing and make adjustments and learn what am I doing wrong. And this honestly has improved my golf game probably more than any tool or training aid or device that I've ever used. It actually shows me what I'm really doing instead of one of my friends trying to tell me what I'm doing wrong. And so this, again, is that same idea of this Internet of Things, where this little device that plugs on here is the thing, and it connects up through Bluetooth to my phone or my tablet, and then up to my cloud account, and then I can go home and analyze my swings and see, did I really improve? Was I hitting it farther? Was I hitting it straighter? Things of that nature. I've got a comment in here. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so just some comments and things to mention when I get to a later section here. Thank you. Okay, so then moving on, this is something many of you will have, a printer maybe on your home network that every once in a while when you're out of ink, it'll pop up and tell you that you're out of ink and then ask you to place an order for more ink. And that's kind of this full circle that we're talking about here. And hopefully you've actually paid attention and analyze this data and done something about it. But if you're like me, I get this message a couple of times, I ignore it, and then when I really need my printer, I haven't gone to the store and I haven't purchased more ink. So that's really important, and hopefully driving home the idea of analyzing that data, but then more importantly, doing something with it. And moving on to the next slide. So that was the idea of the Internet of Things. Now I'm going to talk to you where IoTView fits more in the industrial Internet of Things space. Many of us have been doing this idea of the industrial Internet of Things for years and years, this machine-to-machine type communication. And it's not new to many of you. It's now just being given a name. But the idea and the concept is maybe taken a little bit deeper. What many of you have probably done over the years is had an HMI, connected up to PLCs or controllers or different types of devices, and then been able to collect that data and store it either in a cloud account more recently or at least in an in-house database or some type of server in-house. It doesn't have to be a cloud-based system, especially if you're concerned about security or different things related to that. Let's see. If we flip this diagram kind of on end here, or tear it apart a little bit, if we have, let's say, a wireless network, it doesn't have to be a wireless network, could be a wired network, and now we put some ideas or some concepts of industrial type devices instead of, I showed a printer, a golf training aid, and a thermostat. Well, what if we had PLC or some type of controller, valve or flow meter, temperature controller, power monitor? Insert your idea of an industrial device here, and then let's start to talk about this concept where now if these devices are running Linux or VxWorks, now you can embed IoTView right in these devices and be able to get information from these devices. So let's say that you had a plant or a process with maybe 50 or 100 different flow meters or pumps. Let's talk about pumps, for example. And they're all moving roughly the same material, and they should all have about the same parameters, flow rates, current draw, things of that nature. But now let's say that you're analyzing and comparing all of those against each other and doing some data analytics. Maybe it's with a trend or some dashboards, and you happen to notice that one of those pumps is drawing more current, maybe the motor is drawing more current than the other ones, even though they're supposed to be moving the same material in a similar amount with a similar flow rate. Well, now you can see, oh, wait a minute, maybe a bearing is going bad, or a seal is bad, or it's leaking, or something's going wrong there that you can actually then proactively go fix as opposed to reactively when there's a problem, and especially if there's a safety or hazardous concern there. So that's kind of the idea of where IoTView is coming into play. If you are a manufacturer of these type of devices, or maybe you're a user of these devices, it would be worthwhile encouraging your vendors to be able to then incorporate something like IoTView in their product. Now, maybe you're a manufacturer of that product, and you're really good at making the controls for that product and making it do what it's supposed to do, or what everybody knows what it's supposed to do. IoTView could be just that kind of add-on little piece that now lets you collect that data very easily and possibly even visualize it on tablets and remote devices. I like to think of IoTView a little bit differently than I think of InduSoft Web Studio, where InduSoft Web Studio I typically think of as an HMI or a SCADA type product, yet still very flexible. But for IoTView, I like to think of it first and foremost as the data collection piece of it, and then the visualization piece is kind of the plan B, if you will. It's more of the data collection piece. So hopefully that's some ideas there, especially when you're talking about not only the kind of preventative maintenance, but predictive maintenance. So now you can watch things kind of long term and start to build up some knowledge of how these things behave under different temperatures, different conditions, different material that they're handling, whatever the case may be, and do more predictive analysis long term, especially when you have very critical, maybe hazardous type substances that you're paying attention to. So moving on, really, as I mentioned before, it's using the data to turn into information via analytics and then take action. It's really more about that action and doing something with it, kind of like in that printer example that I mentioned, that if you don't do something with it, you're going to regret it probably later on, and it's kind of I told you so at that point. Well, I look at this loop here as the thing, if I take from those previous diagrams or previous slide, these different things that are out there, and be able to collect that information with some type of known protocol that can interact. It'd be a similar type protocol to be able to collect that information, which I'm going to talk about MQTT in a little bit, and get that information up to the cloud or a local server database. It doesn't have to be in the cloud. But then more importantly, do something with it. Analyze that information, use that to gain insight as to what's going on, and then react to it and do some actionable things. And I looked at this when I drew this diagram, and I said to myself, this is almost like a motion control feedback loop. Well, I know where I want to be. I want to improve my manufacturing, or in motion control, if you know where you're going, you also have to know where you're at to be able to get there, to know what direction, what speed, and that's kind of very similar to what's going on here. I know my end result, what I want to get to, but I have to know how to do that and where I'm at. I can't fix something that I can't measure, so this provides those tools to be able to do that. So what I'd also like to point out is don't be this person. Don't collect data just for the sake of collecting data. Let's solve this problem by using the big data that none of us have the slightest idea what to do with. Don't collect every bit and byte of every different thing. You're just going to have data overload. You're going to fill up databases. You're going to pay too much for storage. Collect the things that are going to make sense for you to monitor. And start small and then work your way into it and adjust. That's the important thing, is adjust to understand. So my poor attempt of trying to throw some humor in here. So now let's talk about IoTView and kind of the features that we've come up with recently and what that brings to the table. So I showed a few of these in another slide. The idea is platform agnostic, can run on Linux. InduSoft in general can run on Windows, but now with this IoTView, we can run on VxWorks and Linux. It's very fast to develop, small footprints, can talk different protocols. Now, this is not specifically about IoTView, but this is more about InduSoft in general. The ability to use OPC, which is coming in IoTView sometime in the future, and the HTML5 and the remote management of this as well. Moving on, some of the IoTView features. You get the graphics. What we're doing is kind of long-term, we're supporting HTML5 graphics for InduSoft Web Studio, for these types of thin clients. So you're going to be able to use your screens, your screen groups, symbols, most of the objects that you have. We can do that now. I don't know an exact number. We've kind of converted, let's say 95% of our objects, and we're working on converting the remainder of those as we move along. But things like your tags, classes, your system tags, the local security system, tasks to be able to do online alarming, to do trending. Now, the trending is a new object that we've supported in Service Pack 1. And the trend tasks allow you to log to a remote database, which I'm going to try to demonstrate here in a few minutes. And some drivers. In the past, we've had Modbus TCP, ABTCP, Soft PLC, and fairly recently we've added MQTT as well as a Modbus serial driver as well. So take a look at those. So talk a little bit about the math worksheets. The math worksheet is new along with Service Pack 1, and what that allows us to do is not only use the screen scripts, the built-in screen scripting, but also the math worksheets, so that now you can have the ability to control your execution of this. This is the execution field if you're not familiar with the math worksheets, and have your script, your built-in scripting or functions running in the background independent of what screen you're on. So this gives you a lot more flexibility. We've supported, since the release of IoTView, a good number of our built-in functions. Now we're also including many of our database functions as well. So in addition to what I mentioned up here on the previous slide, the trend task, logging to a remote database, now you can actually use the built-in scripting and issue really anything, very flexible SQL commands to both read and write to and from remote databases. So that makes just really steps up the power, especially for that data collection of it. As I mentioned, the trend control object is new in the SMA thin client. In the past, we only had the kind of an interesting little HTML5 widget. Well, now when you put a trend object on the screen in a standard application, you don't have to do anything, and in the SMA client, you're going to see a trend that's not exact, but very close to the trend control. You'll get pens, you'll get a cursor, you're going to get a little bit of zoom control and things of that nature. So that's new in Service Pack 1 as well. Again, you don't have to do anything. You just drop that trend control on the screen, and when you view it on an SMA client, you see the trend object on there. Also, something new in the Service Pack 1 is this idea of what we call custom widgets. And what this is the ability to, very similar to an ActiveX control or a .NET control, where you can take third-party developed tools or controls and put them on a screen. Now you can take these third-party web-based controls, whether they're HTML5 or JavaScript, and with just a very little bit of programming, you can easily create an interface to that, what we're calling a custom widget. And take a look at the webinar that we did for the release of Service Pack 1, where Fabio, our product manager, actually demonstrated some really cool tools using custom widgets. But the way that I look at this is it's very similar to an ActiveX or .NET control being placed on our screen. Now you can really open up the world and really take advantage of third-party web-based widgets, which that's kind of a nebulous term, but the idea is to be able to take HTML, JavaScript type widgets that are found online and be able to kind of wrap them up and provide an interface so you can create properties and events and be able to interact with those widgets within an SMA client. So it really opens up a whole lot of opportunities on what we can do there. So the idea of talking about this protocol and being able to get information from these endpoint devices up into the cloud, how do we do that? What's an efficient way to do that? Well, to be able to do that, we need a protocol that's going to be only communicating, not in a polling type fashion over and over and over again as fast as it can. It's going to basically do that by exception or only when it's required. And another thing is we need a protocol to be very lightweight. It needs to be able to work on a product that's just a very small. We're talking about these embedded devices that probably don't have a whole lot of resources, and we need something pretty efficient to be able to do that. So what is that? That protocol is the one that's kind of winning out right now. It's kind of taking the lead. Is called MQTT. And it's kind of winning out as the Internet of Things protocol. And it's an open protocol, and it's standardized by the OASIS Technical Committee. You can do some research on it if you're not familiar with it. But this makes it very easy to adopt a wide variety of Internet of Things type devices and be able to get that information up into the cloud and then be able to pull it down and analyze it. So talking a little bit more about this protocol, the protocol is actually designed to be very lightweight, and it's built on a model called publish and subscribe. And that's a little bit different than the master-slave or, depending on if you've used DeviceNet, consumer and producer, those types of things. It's similar in idea, but the way that I like to look at this is the publisher is doing the writing to the broker, and the subscribers are then coming along and picking that up. And every time I've demonstrated this in front of an audience, what I've done is I've taken the class sign-in list or the lunch sign-up list or whatever piece of paper I happen to have around, and I say, okay, I'm the publisher of this, and the front table in the room is the broker. And I'm going to set this piece of paper down on the broker, and any of you subscribers that want to come up and take a look at it, you can take a look at it whenever you want to, as much as you want, as often as you want, crowd around and take a look at that. And that's kind of the way that this publish and subscribe model works, where a publisher kind of writes to the broker, and you can see here in this bottom diagram, where that broker might be in the cloud, it might be a locally hosted thing on a plant-wide server, but it could be a cloud-based system. And that cloud-based system could be really anywhere where you want it. It could be a server that somebody has set up. There are several free demonstration servers. What I'm actually going to demonstrate is not a cloud-based system. It's actually in one of my colleagues' office in California, and I hope for today's demo he still has it running, and I'm going to connect up to his broker and show you that connection. So hopefully we can do that. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is switch into my development environment here, where I have a project that we're going to demonstrate. So off screen here, what I have is a remote desktop into my Raspberry Pi that I happen to have sitting on my desk. For those of you who are not really familiar with what a Raspberry Pi is, it's a small computer. It's a hobbyist computer. It's inexpensive. It's typically purchased for under $40 US. And it's basically a motherboard that runs Linux. It can run other operating systems as well, but most people run Linux on it. And it has a couple USB ports, an Ethernet port, an HMI port, and a power connector. And I happen to have installed IoTView on this prior to this demonstration. I've gotten that running, and I'm going to use this to demonstrate what's going on. So when I installed this, so another thing that I want to point out about the Raspberry Pi, we are not here to sell you today on a Raspberry Pi. I don't want anybody coming back to us and saying, how much is that Raspberry Pi? How much can I buy it for? This is, I want you to decouple your idea from the Raspberry Pi and think about this as just another demonstration computer. For example, if you were ever demonstrating a software product and you happen to use your Dell or HP or Toshiba or Lenovo laptop, hopefully nobody's going to come and ask you how much is that laptop. You're demonstrating the software on a piece of hardware. That's what I'm doing today. I happen to be using this Raspberry Pi because it's inexpensive and it's a very good way to show a low horsepower computer that for me is easy to carry around in my computer bag, and it makes it easy to demonstrate. So again, we're not selling you on Raspberry Pi, we're selling you on the idea of running on a low-end Linux computer here. So hopefully that helps. Also, that another idea, I happen to be on my network here in my office, but this could very well be a radio connection, a cell-based connection, any number of types of things. So any way that you can get information up to those different network providers or cloud-based providers, whether it's Rackspace or Amazon or Microsoft Azure Cloud, or even your own system. The last time I demonstrated this, I did this all through the hotspot on my phone back to my colleague in California's broker in his office. So what I want to show you here is, let me maximize this a little bit. This is a remote desktop into my Raspberry Pi, and I wanted to point out here is this task manager. And if I sort this, what you should be able to see here is this is running, should be running, our remote agent. Now, I put our remote agent on here. This is part of the installation of this. What I did is I created an IoTView folder, and I put our remote agent software on here. That's the only piece of software you need to hand copy over onto here. And then I was able to do everything remotely. I was able to install the product, install the runtime license. I was able to use this install script, and it installed everything and got my Apache web server set up. So with that remote agent running on this Raspberry Pi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this off screen, and then I'm going to take this project and I'm going to connect up to that Raspberry Pi. Now, I'll pull this back into view here. You can see that this Raspberry Pi has this IP address in my home network here, 192.168.1.225. I'm going to use that same address here, and this remote connection tool, I'm going to connect up to it. Now, that remote agent over on the Raspberry Pi is going to connect and respond and says, okay, look, I'm connected to IoTView on my Linux platform over there. And at that point, I have already done this install system file. So that takes a little bit of time, and I wanted to get that out of the way. For somebody who's going to be mass producing these types of devices, you could copy your Linux image with all of this installed, with your project already downloaded, and then just make a copy of your image and then just deploy those that way. So all of these steps don't have to be done every time if you're making a production type device. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect up to this project and download my project. But before I do that, I'm going to run it here locally to show you what's going on. Actually, I have the MQTT driver here. And now this MQTT driver, this particular broker does not have security built in. We don't have security on this particular driver. That's something we're talking about later on. But this is connecting to the broker. And so then I'm passing these tags in my project to that broker. This is essentially you can almost think of it as the IP address or where that's living. And then what I've done is I built up this address in that broker. When I write to this, now we're acting both as the subscriber and the publisher. And so we can write as a publisher and read as a subscriber. I get to set up my kind of tree view where these tags get to go. In this case, I'm doing a pump animation. So what I've done is this is out in the field, and then I've set up zone 1, and then I've called it mpump 145, and then I have all these different parameters: inlet pressure, outlet pressure, flow rate, etc. And so that's how I'm getting that. You get to create your own tree view and how that lives on the particular broker. So before I start my IoTView application, I wanted to show you here that I can actually run this on my InduSoft Web Studio runtime here, and I'm actually connecting and communicating to that broker remotely. This exact same project that's here on my desktop runtime, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. I'm going to now connect up to my Raspberry Pi, and I'm connected. Now I'm going to go ahead and download that project, and this takes just a few seconds depending on how large it is. This one happens to have some pictures in it. And when you make changes, you don't have to re-download the entire project. You can just download an individual screen or whatever worksheet you're working on. But for the sake of this, I wanted to show you how long it took to get this whole thing down there. But once this is down there, including any custom widgets that you've created, any images, any movies, things of that nature, then we're going to go ahead and run it. And almost done here. Then I'm going to go ahead and run this project. It's started. It's running on my Raspberry Pi. Let's pull this into view again here. Let's expand this up. So in addition to my remote agent that's running, now I should also be able to see somewhere on here, hopefully, is somewhere in here is IoTView is actually running. Maybe I'm just missing it. There it is, IoTView. So the project is actually running now on the Raspberry Pi. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's no local viewer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Chrome web browser to be able to view that. Now, because there's no local viewer, you could actually use a Chrome browser or a variation thereof, which is called Chromium, on the actual device to be able to view that locally. If you wanted to put that into full screen, you could go into kiosk mode and things of that nature. So my Chrome browser opened up off screen. I'm going to pull that on screen. I'm going to type in my IP address, and I just happen to have this right here. This is the IP address /MA for mobile access, and then I'm going directly to that pump screen. It's challenged me for security. I'm going to go, because I don't have security, just hit enter here, and now I can see that screen, and this is actually what's running on the Raspberry Pi or on Linux and communicating over the network to my colleague in California. I'm in Michigan in the United States, and it's getting that data from his broker. So that's what's going on there. Now, what I wanted to do is take this kind of to the next step and show you how to be able to log data from this to a database and show you just how easy this is. Before I forget, because I often do, I'm going to stop this project. So off screen, my browser said, hey, your project's stopped. I'm going to stay connected here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go onto Windows here and create a new database. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a database on my laptop and then connect up to that from the Raspberry Pi. So in order to do that, I'm going to use this management tool, and I'm using Microsoft SQL Server Express. I'm going to make a new database on my laptop here, and I'm going to expand this and show you that I've got quite a few different databases on here. I do this type of demo all the time. And I'm going to create a brand new database, and I'm going to call it IoTView, and W for webinar, and it's the PM webinar. We did a morning one this morning, so IoTView WP is the new database. I'm going to go ahead and create that, and that usually shows up down here at the bottom. And what I want to do is expand these tables here and show you there's no tables in here other than the system tables, so there's really no data in that IoTView webinar PM database that I've created. So now let's go hook this up to that database. In order to do this, it's kind of a two-step process. First, I'm going to go into my project and set up the connection or the default connection that I can use through my entire project. There are other ways you can connect to a database. This is kind of the simplest and most universal. If I knew the connection string, how to connect to that database, I could manually type it in here, but I'm going to use this wizard that's going to help me build that connection string. I could choose any of these providers, different databases, but for this, I'm going to use Microsoft SQL Server and go to Next. Now, to be able to communicate to this, what this has to do from the Raspberry Pi, it can't go directly to the database. It's got to go through a piece of software that we have called a Studio Database Gateway. And the Raspberry Pi is going to connect up to the Studio Database Gateway via TCP/IP. And then we have to tell it, how does the gateway then talk to the database? So from here, I'm kind of configuring how that is going to talk directly to the database. And what it's going to do, since the Studio Database Gateway is running on my laptop, I'm going to tell it to go to my local IP address here, and then talk to the SQL Express database, and I'm going to use Windows Security. And because I'm on my laptop here, I can test this connection. Okay, it's going there, and I also want to point it to instead of just the engine, the SQL Express is the engine, I want to point it to the IoTView webinar PM database. Test my connection, make sure I have that set up. And so now I know that my laptop can actually talk to that database that's on my laptop. That's a good thing. But in order to allow this to understand where it's going to go from the Raspberry Pi, I need to set up this database gateway, and where does it point? In this case, what I'm going to do is point it to my IP address of my computer, or it could be the host name. In this case, I'm going to do a quick IP config and see, okay, my laptop is address 8 on the network, so I'm going to configure this as 192.168.1.8, and that will tell the gateway what address to talk to. So all that is good, and we'll say okay. And now in order to get this going, before we get this going, I'm going to install the Studio Database Gateway software. And before I do that, let's do one more thing. In order to get this thing logging to that database, what I'm going to do is come in here to Tasks and set up a trend. And instead of going to a proprietary file on the hard drive, since that's not supported on IoTView, we're going to have to go to a database. And I'm going to tell it to use this current value and log that. That's that first upper left-hand corner value in that bump screen. And I'm going to tell it to log once per second. And I want to see the trend, the database configuration. It's actually going to go use that configuration that we just set up, and it's going to automatically create this table in that database. And this trend 001 comes from this name. You can change this and make this whatever you want to. So that's going to automatically load that now. And now that I've made these changes, I'm going to save this worksheet. I'm going to go back and connect up to this Raspberry Pi and download this project. And while that project is downloading, I'm going to go ahead and start that Studio Database Gateway. And what I've done is I've actually copied it out of the installation folder where InduSoft is installed and put it in its own folder here. And it's just this executable and these couple other INI files here. So it's stadosvr.exe. I'm just going to go ahead and double click on that. And what that's going to do is it's go ahead and put that down in my taskbar down here. And I can unhide this and show you that this thing is actually running in the background, and that's what's going to take the TCP/IP information from the Raspberry Pi and then send it to and from my database. So I can move this out of the way. The files were sent successfully. Now I can run this project, and this should be now running here on my Raspberry Pi. I'm going to pull my Chrome browser back into view. I'm going to refresh this. Connect back up to it. It's already running. It's actually already logging to my database, but I wanted to show you this information here. Right now, this is a value of 60, and I'm going to move this off the screen here, go back to my database. Here's the IoTView webinar PM tables. I'm going to refresh this, and there you can see it's automatically created that trend table there. I'm going to edit the top 200 rows. And I'm in the Eastern time zone in the United States, and what this is doing is logging based on UTC time, so it's 2100 hours, 51 minutes, and you can see that value is going in there, and this is actually still continuing to log in the background. But hopefully you understand how easy that was. Hopefully I described it pretty well. Again, just a reminder for questions and comments, I can't hear you on this webinar, so if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. And I'm going to go back to the rest of the presentation, talk a little bit about benefits. You know, we talked about really the getting the information from the thing up to the database or up to the cloud or where you have your data stored. That's really what I like to see about this product, is really that ease of that data collection. And maybe if you're already creating this type of product, or you're going to talk to your vendors about maybe embedding this, or maybe you're going to embed this into a product. Maybe you already have a controller that runs Linux and you'd like to add this functionality into it. This is going to reduce your time to market and make this easier to do. Small footprint, easy to incorporate, easy to collect data, and just the functionality of everything that we have built into InduSoft Web Studio. Why reinvent that wheel if that's something that we kind of do best of breed or kind of experts at this? So with that, again, I want to remind you, questions, comments in the chat panel or the Q&A panel. We have some brochures and resources. I wanted to point out this brochure is really kind of a nice brochure. It's up on the web page. It's a 3-page PDF that shows you the differences in the different runtimes that we have, whether it's the full-blown InduSoft Web Studio, Embedded View, CE View, IoT View, and what operating systems are supported, the typical system requirements, and then it breaks it down by feature, what's supported in each of those different runtime environments. And then most of these things that say supported with limitations have a note, and there's a real good description down below as to what is or what is not supported. But hopefully you'll find that quite a bit of things are supported, and it's really a nicely done featured product, and we're expanding that all the time. So let's move this out of the way here. Also, we have a brochure specifically on IoTView, and we've now done several different webinars on this, and here's a couple. And again, we're going to be posting these slides as well as the recording of this PowerPoint. Usually within a couple of days, this will be posted, so you can feel free to take a look at these links. These links are all live already on the website. If you can find them on the website, I can point you to where we have some of this information. You can just go to the InduSoft website, and here under here under marketing is literature. And under here, you can find the data sheet for InduSoft Web Studio, this IoTView brochure, and then this how to choose between the different runtimes is all right there. as well as the different webinars that we've done. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier that we've got over 130 webinars recorded. You can go here under support, go to video library and webinars, and you can get at these things via the different categories. You can just pull those as needed. And again, we do 2 or 3 of these a month, and hopefully that's a lot of good information for you. If you'd like to co-host a webinar with us, let us know. Do have a couple of comments coming in. Let's see if I can go back and answer some of these. Let's see, share. Currently no support for authentication in MQTT. That's correct. Examples of IoTView in manufacturing. Yeah, I think kind of as I mentioned, and these comments came in before I kind of got to these slides, IoTView and what types of devices is it targeted for? If we go back up to this, these slides up here where it could be anything from power meters, temperature controllers, valves, flow meters, anything typically with just a handful of I/O points in it. There's a good chance that it's going to have some type of real-time control, whether it's VxWorks or Linux, or maybe the next generation of product might have that. Could be a PLC, could be a networking type device. So lots of different opportunities to be able to get that information up into the cloud, do preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance, those types of things. Being able to get that information not only over a network in a plant, but over cell phones, via radio modems, via again, as I demonstrated, in this case, my IoTView running on the Raspberry Pi was communicating TCP/IP to that Studio Database gateway, and then SQL on the other side. So really, you just need something that's going to give you that TCP/IP connection back to the server to be able to collect that data. So lots of different ways. It could be a radio modem, it could be a cell connection, could be a satellite connection. We've got some customers doing remote deployments using satellites as well. So again, lots of opportunities to get that information from your devices up into the cloud, and love to have you contact us if you're a manufacturer of that type of device or want to work with your vendors that supply those devices to you. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, again, I'm open for questions. Again, put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel, and I don't see any new questions coming in. Let me make sure that I'm up to date here. Yep. So with that, I don't see any questions. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, you can send any questions, kind of sales or information related to info@InduSoft.com. If you have a support question, you can contact us via phone or via email at support@InduSoft.com. You can also try our chat on our homepage of our website. Do a live chat with some of our technical group or even our sales group there. But let us know what if there's any opportunity here. Also, again, we're going to be recording this and posting it on the website in just a couple of days. You can get at the recording of this, the slide deck, as well as we're going to be following up with a survey. On the survey, if you give us your shirt size, we're going to send you a free T-shirt just for joining us. We show your appreciation. And let us know how I did today, how we're doing in general, and what you'd like to see as webinar topics in the future. We really appreciate you joining us today. At this point, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining. Really good comments, everybody. I really appreciate you've given me feedback during the presentation. Hopefully the audio cleared up for a few of you. But again, thank you, everybody, and let us know if you'd like to get some more information about IoTView, or particularly if you'd like to place an order or a demonstration of it specifically for your application. But thank you, everybody, and with that, I'm going to end the webinar, and have a great day.